Hello, everyone, and welcome to our September 8th, 2022 Policy Committee meeting. The agenda has been uploaded and shared with everyone. For today, we have one item, and it is item 3A, Policy 208, the development, adoption, and implementation of policies. And this is for second reading.
Thank you. And I know there was some conversation at our last school board meeting about, and I think it was primarily around the pace and thinking about how much time would we need to actually get through our policies. And look, we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. If it says a third of our policies each year, we talked about maybe making it a fifth of our policies, and then if we get to a third, then we're doing better than planned. Or just, I think too, one thing that I talked about with Upper Lawford Camp was that right now, because there's kind of a lot of policy catch-up work that we're doing, and once we're caught up, it might be easier for us to move to a third a year. But right now, I think that we've got bigger policies to do and a lot more work to do it. It's harder to get it all done at that pace. I think there might have been some additional conversation related to access to the policies, making sure that we had electronic access. Yeah, but I think we're looking at changing it to every 4 years as opposed to every 3 years was the main change. And then, and actually the suggested changes are noted there. Paquette, you had noted some things too, and anything you want to add?
And we'll take questions, but if what the superintendent was referring to is Section 5, implementation of and access to policy, you'll see 5B, 5D covers those two things that Superintendent Manager was referring to. Member Sam.
Yeah, I fully support what we have there for B, because I think that's the only way we can do this successfully going forward. Having everything available electronically, whether it's in-house for someone walking in the door, or at the school for someone walking in the building, and for families at home. I do have a question though, and I don't know who can answer this, if it's Ms. Paquette or Anthony. So if we're doing a quarter of the policies annually, how many does that entail? So that would be about how many? Is that,
I mean,
let's see, and I want to just follow that up with the other thing I had brought up at the board meeting was what defines review. I mean, if administration and a board member, policy chair, let's say, has sat and looked at policies to address, and out of the hundreds of policies that we have, that should count as review, where we don't have to formally deal with that policy in committee. So you're the chair, the policy chair, and assistant superintendent, superintendent. I mean, you're going through these to define or look at which ones we should be addressing. And I don't know that that's defined here. So we got a number on how many policies.
Right, I'm counting right now.
But does that make sense with what I'm saying?
It makes sense, and without even, I would make a guesstimate, it's going to be upwards of 100 policies, if not more, per year that would have to be reviewed. And that's why you're spot on with regards to additional conversation will need to happen with policy chair to discuss how many policies do we bring, to make sure that if we are simply reviewing policies that require very little changes, or even just simple adoption, saying that the board has reviewed those policies, would that honor the spirit of what was intended by the definition of reviewing policies on a consistent basis?
Yeah,
so we discussed having additional conversations on what does 4 years look like, and what would we bring to make sure that we are those things.
Well, and again, and my take on it is if the policy's been looked at by the policy chair and administration, that, okay, look at this doesn't need to be addressed, we can move on from this one, we don't need to have a formal review of that policy. I mean, that should still count as being looked at, and I don't know how you put a tick mark on that or a check
Right. And
box on that, that's one of the quarter of the policies we're trying to review on an annual basis, but that should be part of the process.
I think what we could do is, just looking at the numerical series, and what I would suggest is something similar to what you're referring to is that we say, okay, we're going to review this month. We're going to review the 100 series and the 300 series, because those are two that only have like maybe 10 or 15 in that segment, and so we would peruse them, make sure that there was nothing new with MSBA that needed to be changed. If there were big questions that came up, we could go over them, but maybe almost kind of like a flipped classroom where we read it and kind of go over it a little bit on our own, and if there's questions, then we bring it up. Because that way I think we could get through a quarter a year.
Do you have just an estimate on the number of policies we're talking about?
So counting through, I'd say there's at least 100, but part of it is because we still are split between the 100 series and the 1,000 series. That's where it gets kind of tricky, because it's almost like we have like the old Dewey Decimal System, and then we have the new library system.
Seems like it would make sense to address those first then, so we can all be on the same page, the same system of policies. To me, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's slightly over 150. Slightly over 150 MSBA policies. And we're still learning some of them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like we've been on track to do 25 or even 30 or 40 a year. But if we're looking at them and saying these don't need to be addressed, that should also count that. Okay,
So
we reviewed those policies, they're fine, we're moving on to other ones that need to be addressed in committee.
Sure. Would just the committee chair, the policy committee, and administration look at those, or would those be sent to the whole policy committee
The whole-
to kind of read
the whole committee.
through?
So I just looked at if there's 150 policies, and if we do a quarter of them every year, and we divide that quarter of them by 12 months and do it, that's about 3 policies a month. So that seems doable.
Well, I think any board member, policy, committee board member should be able to bring them forward if you see something that, or a parent or some teacher, administrators brought to our attention, bring forward that one too.
I had a question about the, so I think it's great that we're going with the electronic copy, online, keeping those up to date. It's really hard to keep a paper copy up to date with all the changes and all the sites, but maybe this is more of a procedural item, but for parents who maybe want a copy of a certain policy or all the policies, would each school then have a point person, or what would the system be for parents to get those policies from their school? Would it probably vary by school?
It would vary by school, but also we know that depending on how many policies are passed, we know that the site will be able to make a decision if the principal or the administrative assistant can quickly print that policy out. Right?
Yeah.
Or most sites have a copy binder of all the policies, and they can simply go in and grab those policies and hand them to the parent, and then replace their policies themselves, right? By later going in and replacing the policies that they had just given out. So site by site, we just have to determine how is it going to happen. Can they schedule walk in, and can they have access, and they have the responsibility of providing. If it's a bigger job, then we could create a process where there's a request that can be sent to my office, and then we can either print those policies and mail them to the family member or provide them to the family member themselves.
Yeah, and
It
that
just
makes
depends.
sense for the bigger jobs, absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Just know that we don't have many individuals walking in asking for a copy of our policies or an individual policy necessarily. And if so, it's usually those very, those common policies, you know, like harassment or bullying. Those
Which
some
are
of the
in
more frequently asked for policies. And we have many of those at the ready if a family member asks for them. Some of the ones that families don't ask for often, we have to quickly, again, look them up, quickly print them off for families and they'll have them in their hands. And honor that request for a hard copy.
That makes sense.
And that being said, you know, I see one of the future changes in this policy is, you know, keeping paper copies in your office. You know, paper copies shall be placed in the superintendent's office and shall be available for reference purposes to other interested persons. I mean, you know, how many people have walked into the superintendent's office asking for a policy in the past 10 years? You know, so again, in this day and age, does it make sense to be keeping paper copies in the superintendent's office? Now, obviously, if someone did come into you, are you gonna bring it up on a computer screen and sit down with them and discuss it?
Or we could
Or
say
you're gonna have-
how about if we said like availability of paper copies at the district office, because that way it can all be on a computer, and if somebody wants to print a copy, we can do it.
Yeah,
Well,
print it as needed.
I mean, you just basically said you gotta, do we have a book of policies now?
Yes.
And so we've been maintaining that makes sense, I mean, so, and is that in your office? How is, I mean, that should be easy enough to maintain just one book, obviously, if it's maintaining multiple books, that gets really, really complicated. So we can go forward with this for now, but we should probably look at the sustainability of that at some point, at some point in time.
So,
Is this policy pretty on par with other districts that you've been at?
the ones we reviewed, we looked up other districts, see how they went about doing those annual reviews, and there's a range that MSBA also gives, and so we are within that range. So back to the agenda there. For number 4, there are no regulations at this time, or
I do have a suggestion, or just a point of conversation for us under other. Looking at the policies, policy 103, under complaints, students, parents, and employees and other persons. The last time we had a new adoption, it was August 17th of last year. And some of the, it's odd, but I think that this is part of statute, that in statute, we have to list the names and phone numbers and emails of people to, for people to be the receiver of complaints. So, for example, Anthony Bonds is listed as our Title IX coordinator, and that makes sense. But I just noted that Laura Hoffman-Hardick, our former Human Resources Officer, is listed there. And so we should probably, at our next meeting, take on policy 103 to update that, and that's a pretty quick update.
So could we make that change at this meeting, so then we can have a first reading at the school board meeting, and then a second reading next month? Get it done? Or what's the process there on that?
yeah, it's not on the agenda as an official topic for first reading, so I would say
Okay.
we can make sure that it's made
Yeah.
Okay, good.
next meeting.
Which section is that in there? I see one, oh, I see some of the numbers. I see.
Yeah, section
3.
Yeah, 3C.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be an easy change.
Yeah. And then, since we're on interesting,
It just seems odd to me too, that something like that has to go through 2 readings, a name change.
There are a couple policies that require a specific name.
Right.
And then the places where it doesn't require a specific name, we have been getting better at making sure that it just lists the title versus the individual.
So that's
There
what we
are,
want to do there.
correct. So there are definitely
So we'll make that change.
Yep, a couple policies. I'm trying to remember. I want to say the Title IX one might be one that specifically says you have to have the name of the person.
But there
as
also
an
might be policies where you do want a name on there too, so we want to
Right.
make sure we're doing that.
I also noted, there's been a lot of conversation around the state around, public comment at the school board meetings. A lot of, sometimes some of the political nature of things going on, and then also, there's been conversation too about with going into political season, sometimes people will try and use it as a forum for political comment, come in and say, I'm John Magus and I'm running for school board, or I'm John Magus and I'm running for Congress, X, Y, and Z. So I think taking a look at that might be helpful. But I'm also noting, it's kind of weird the way it's in board book right now. It says, 206, it says recommendations as opposed to like public comments. So I'm not sure, we want to take a look at maybe our past minutes from that meet. It was December 15th of 2020, so it's been a little while, but it's been while we were here. But it's odd that it's stated as, it's entitled recommendations under 206.
So is this policy 206?
Yeah. So I was thinking it might not hurt for us to take a look at policy 206. I wanted to,
So are we keeping a list of these for the board chair when she returns so that they're on our next month's meeting?
That's great. And I will also throw out a bit of caution. I'm not sure if they are simple changes that will be easier to bring forward for next time. If it takes more research or more fact finding, that may be something we bring in a future.
and it may even just be that it's misnamed in board book and should just say public comment. If that's all it needs, we just need to change it. All right.
We have no further items.
All right, thank you.
Policy committee. Thank you.